Okay, go ahead.
Okay, first off, I want to thank the mayor and council, Jody, Joel, everybody else that is here, and then in the computer world audience. In light of everything going on the last few weeks with use of force questions, I thought it was I thought I needed to explain to the mayor and council and people and the citizens of Sunbury what our use of force policy is for the Sunbury Police Department, and go through just some of the protocols that we go through. Right now, we're in a unique situation, and I keep saying that because we have a lot of new police officers in the city. So we are reviewing this, not only the veteran officers are reviewing this policy on a daily basis, weekly, monthly, everything. We have these new officers that are coming in, and this is something we instill to them when we drill it into their heads, that this is one of the most important things when it comes to law enforcement. Next slide, if you go. Basically, your use of force policy runs under 1.3.1. The use of force continuum authorizing only to accomplish lawful objectives. The use of force justification. Pennsylvania Crimes Code, Title 18, Chapter 5, General Principles of Justification describes those circumstances in which the use of force is justified. These provisions and the related case law, including federal case law, made binding on Pennsylvania through the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, shall establish the only legally binding restrictions regarding the use of force by police department personnel as it relates to criminal or enforceable civil matters. In any necessary use of force, all police department personnel shall only utilize the force necessary to effect lawful objectives. In conformance to the provisions of the Pennsylvania Crimes Code, other Pennsylvania statutory provisions, and applicable Pennsylvania and federal court decisions, in accordance with the department's use of force continuum that establishes use of force options and their appropriate application. So essentially, we use Title 18, Chapter 5 to basically go by what the legislature tells us what we can and cannot do. One of the first things that we do use before we use any type of force is, during the force continuum, is de-escalation. That is something that really came into law enforcement probably the last 10 to 15 years, is de-escalation. So when safe and feasible and without compromising law enforcement priorities, officers shall use de-escalation tactics in order to reduce the need for force. Some of those ways are, officers shall conduct a threat assessment so as not to precipitate an unnecessary, unreasonable, or disproportionate use of force by placing themselves or others in undue jeopardy. Team approaches to de-escalation are encouraged and should consider officer training and skill level, number of officers, and whether any officer has successfully established rapport with the subject. Basically saying that that's what we try to say when we go to either domestic violence calls or any type of disturbances. We try to go in at least too deep. With our small department, sometimes it's tough with handling calls to call, but we prioritize what we're doing, and we always recommend you go in too deep with somebody just for safety reasons alone, for not only the officer, but for the citizen. For officers use a team approach to de-escalation, each individual officer's obligation to de-escalate will be satisfied as long as the officers actually complement the overall approach. Selection of de-escalation options should be guided by the totality of the circumstances with the goal of attaining voluntary compliance. So a lot of the things, like we say, a lot of times an officer will get on scene, or a lot of citizens don't know some of our newer officers, but they recognize myself, or Sergeant Bremergen, or Corporal Slack, and right away they're going to want to talk to us. And unfortunately, we're in the supervisory role, so we try to get the officers to, we see how we were also, when we're on scene, we're also trying to reevaluate and supervise them and see what they're doing. A lot of times they want to come talk to us, and we'll talk. We try to de-escalate everything that's going on. Because a lot of times, it's just a misunderstanding of what's going on until you get everybody together, everybody apart, and try to solve it. A lot of times, it's just de-escalating by talking to them. That's all they want to do. They want somebody to lean on, talk to. So that's why a lot of times, the veteran guys, and myself, Slack and Bremergen, they flock to us because we've been here the longest and they know us. And they know what kind of officers we are. They know they can talk to us and deal with us. The City of Sunbury Police Department has established a use of force continuum composed of 9 levels of force. Doesn't mean each one of these this is the way it has to go. This is where you start, and it could change at any point in time depending on the situation. Use of force level 1, officer presence. Just by me showing up on scene, that's a use of force. As soon as I pull up in the car, marked car, uniform, that is considered a use of force through our force policy. Use of force level 2 is verbal command. During citizen contacts, each officer must endeavor to make every reasonable attempt to ensure his or her conduct inspires respect and generates cooperation feeling of goodwill between the citizen and the department. That is instilled in our officers every day. Treat everyone, no matter who they are, with respect, and you'll get a lot further once you do that. The manner and form in which officer speaks to an individual can be effective means of exerting control over the situation. Verbal control may be in the form of advice, persuasion, admonitions, or orders. The volume and tone of the officer's comments may also be an effective tool to assume control over a situation without having to progress to any higher level of force. The use of profanity or disrespectful or argumentative conduct on the part of the officer is never acceptable. Let's be real. It happens. We have officers sometimes, they do get a little aggressive when they're trying to talk to somebody. It does happen. We're human. We get angry too, we get upset. It's where do we take that anger and aggression on the citizen, maybe needing help or something like that. I'm not saying it's perfect. None of this is perfect, but we try to refrain from using disrespectful language, profanities, and stuff like that. Does it happen? Depending on the situation, what's going on. It does happen. And we try to either counsel the officer, the language they use. Does it happen every day? No. Depending, again, on the situation. I'm not saying it's great. We're not perfect. We're human. So going on to the use of force level 3, intermediate devices. So taser electronic control devices, commonly referred to as tasers, and chemical agents, which is OC spray, may be utilized by police personnel as an appropriate and effective use of force in certain circumstances. The use of the taser or OC shall be restricted to the following situations: when necessary for the officer to defend himself or herself or other threats of or imminent assault by physically offensive or combative actions by any individual or animal. To effectually a lawful arrest when confronted with a non-compliant, non-submissive individual. To prevent the commission of a criminal offense. When lower levels of force have been exhausted or by the nature of confrontational circumstances would be deemed ineffective. Taser and chemical agents will be used only to the extent necessary to overcome the resistance of the suspect and with the authorized scope of the current departmental training standards. A lot of times you get on scene, there's a disturbance, fight, somebody's being aggressive with you, you could use them for mental health issues. I've had to case somebody where a mental health patient was actually halfway going to jump out the window. And we had to use a taser to get them to drop right there, which was what they did. That's one of the effective ways, we couldn't get near me at knives, stuff like that. A lot of times we get our tasers out, people stop. They see the red dots and they comply after that point. Once the compliance is in effect, we're done. Then we go back to, maybe you take a step back, maybe now you're talking. Taking community custody, treating them with respect. That's all we ask our officers to do. OC, we don't use a lot of OC here. We have guys that are officers that are trained in OC, but we very rarely have to use OC. So on to the use of level number 4, mechanical compliance. On occasion, police officers are faced with uncooperative individuals or one who refuses to be placed into custody, and alternatives would be inappropriate or have been ineffective. Incidents of this nature require officers to use some combination of strength, leverages, takedowns, holds, come alongs with sufficient force to make the lawful arrest without unnecessarily aggravating the situation. The object of this level of force is to gain control and compliance while minimizing the risk of injury to the officer, the person being placed in custody, or innocent bystanders. This is very important, and I want everybody to listen to this. This is something we've had in our policies for a long time. The use of carotid restraint or other chokeholds or neck restraints are specifically and strictly prohibited by the use of our department. We do not do chokeholds. We do not do carotid needles, basically somebody. There is an exception to the rule. If an officer or another person is in fear of death or serious bodily injury, and there is no other alternative based on the presenting circumstances, carotid restraints or other chokeholds are permissible for defense of the officer or another's life as a last resort. So that is the only exception to that rule. We do not use them on a regular basis. We don't hardly ever have to really get physical with a lot of people. But when we do, it's to get compliance of what we need to do right then and there, and we're done. Use of force level 5, unarmed striking techniques. This is basically your fists, hands, elbows, knees, feet, striking the adversary. These striking techniques may be used by officers to defend themselves against unlawful assaults, where higher levels of force are not necessary, and lower levels of force would be inappropriate or have been ineffective. Use of force level 5, or number 6, is canine deployment. We used to have K9, but we still have it in our policy in case the K9 does come back, or we use in other departments with their K9. So we kind of give that K9 officer that comes into our jurisdiction, if we can kind of give them an overview of what we're looking for. So now I'm going to just skip over that real quick. Use of force level number 7 is striking implement. The use of striking implement shall be restricted to quelling physical confrontation where higher levels of force are not necessary and lower levels of force would be inappropriate or have an impact. Be it on or what So, use of force level number 8, less lethal munitions. That's essentially your beanbag rounds. We do not have rubber bullets. We do have a beanbag shotgun, I believe still, but I don't think we've ever before. Still sitting in our vault. Use of force level number 9, deadly or potentially deadly force. An officer will utilize deadly force only when legally justified and when they need to do so, strong and compelling, only as a last resort. When lower levels of force have been ineffective or would be inappropriate given the threat level confronting the officer. When a firearm or other form of deadly force is used, it must be with the realization that the death of another human may occur. Section 1.3.2 of our rules and regulations related to the use of deadly force shall be the controlling policy of the police department as it relates to the use of deadly force. The section, as well as the policy disclaimer, the section, as well as other general orders, are explanatory in nature and are intended as a guide for departmental personnel in accomplishing their mandated lawful objectives. It shall not be considered or construed to create a higher standard than provided by law. So we still have to go by what the law says. Although the use of force continuum generally ascribes the process whereby an officer can escalate the application of force under various presenting situations, nothing in this policy shall infer that any given level cannot be skipped in the escalation, given those presenting circumstances, or that any escalation cannot be reduced given other presenting circumstances. So if we're in a situation where we're talking to somebody and they pull out a gun, or a knife, or a deadly weapon against another person or another officer, you're not going to use the taser, you're not going to use whatever, you're going to skip. That's why I said it's depending on the situation that you come up with, is what you use deadly force. Under the use of deadly force, again, this is under Title 18. The peace officer, law enforcement officer, as defined in Chapter 5 of the Pennsylvania Crimes Code, Title 18, Section 501, shall only use deadly force when necessary and justified to effect lawful objectives in confirmation to the Pennsylvania Crimes Code, other Pennsylvania statutory provisions, and the Pennsylvania federal court decision. Title 18, Chapter 5, Section 508, subsection A, relating to the use of force in law enforcement, provides for the lawful and justified use of deadly force by a police officer only when he or she believes that the action is in defense of human life, including the officer's own life, or in defense of any person that be imminent danger or seriously physical injury, or when he or she believes both that such force is necessary to prevent the arrest by being defeated by resistance or escape, and the person to be arrested has committed or attempted for a forcible felony, or is attempting to escape and possesses a deadly weapon, or otherwise indicates that he or she will endanger human life or inflict serious bodily injury unless arrested without delay. That some comes down to Tennessee versus Garner. That's where they got our guidance comes from that, where they had a male that was breaking into a home, jumped the fence, they chased him, shot him in the back. He didn't have a weapon. So even though it was a felony, because it used to be all felonies were like you can just shoot if it's a felony. You have to be able to justification that they had a deadly weapon. So that's where we get our guidance from Tennessee versus Garner. Prohibited use of firearms. Officers are prohibited from discharging firearms under the following circumstances. 1, when it appears that an innocent bystander or other officers are likely to be injured by the officer's firearm discharge. For the purposes of discharging any firearm into the air or ground, warning shots, and an attempt to cause a fleeing subject to stop or surrender. Do not do warning shots. Firing a weapon at or from a moving vehicle, since it is rarely effective and extremely hazardous to innocent persons. Do not. Like on TV, you see them shooting at cars, going down the Wild West. We don't do that. We just don't do that. There are exceptions to the rules. We've had that happen here. The occupants of another vehicle are using deadly force against this officer or another person, either with or from the vehicle. There are no other alternatives available based on the presenting circumstances. Again, it comes back to what circumstances are presenting the officer at the time. And that's what they have to deal with all the time. There was a couple questions about the medical attention required following use of force. I was asked. So officers shall arrange for an emergency medical services EMS to examine, treat, and transport any subject to a medical facility if the force used by police personnel caused injury, injury is suspected, or injury is alleged. So every time we use any type of physical use of force, whether it be taser, again, we do verbal or presence. No, we're not having EMS come. But any type of physicality with the suspect, we're calling EMS in to do an evaluation. We have people that they don't want treated. They'll sign a waiver. That's usually with the EMS personnel. But our obligation is to make sure we get them, offer them the treatment that they need, which we do a lot. And people do sign off a lot. They think they're injured or they're suspected injury, where there was no really injury that happened. I was hurt. So we'll call EMS down to check out. So another question was about our written reports, investigation, and reviews. All officers shall complete a departmental use of force report and a taser report if used. If applicable, whenever they discharge a firearm other than routine training, recreational purposes, or animal disposal. Exceptions, again, is the animal disposal. If we have to put an animal down, we don't have to, do no use of force per se form. They'll document it in the report while they dispatch an animal, and the supervisors usually are called part of that anyways. Take any actions that result into or alleged to have resulted in any injury to the death of another person. Uses physical force or is alleged to have used physical force on another person. So even though there's no typical regular form, taser has a form we use on a regular basis for when we use a taser form. Any other form use of force report is usually the officer's report itself. It's going to be very detailed, what they did, how they did it, what they did, and why they did it. Those are the questions the supervisors are really on top. Again, we're in a unique situation. We have a lot of new officers. They're learning this, and it's great because they're on top of things when it comes to this stuff. So the last thing I want to show you before I go into a couple more things is a little video that kind of sums up what I believe we do.
Okay.
It's about a minute long. That's it.
Gordon Brad Hare with today's tip from Lexington. And today's tip is for law enforcement and corrections officers, and it's about chicken wings. Now, I know you're thinking, what is Graham talking about? You're probably thinking I lost my marbles. But I'm not talking about food. I'm talking about something much more serious. Unauthorized arm control holds. These holds can vary, but they all involve forcing a person's arms behind the back and some joint manipulation. Some versions of this involve torquing the straight arms upward, away from the back and towards the head. These holds involve some risk of broken bones, as well as muscle, tendon, and other soft tissue damage. Now, I worked the streets. I know it was a long time ago, but it worked, folks. These arm control holds are very, very valuable when they're authorized, and they can be very effective. Not surprisingly, the big problems come when officers use holds that are not authorized or use control holds in situations where they're not warranted. Right here in California, there have been millions of dollars of payouts over the last few years due to the alleged abuses of arm control holds. When you're working the streets or jails and it's reasonably necessary for you to use a wrist or arm control hold, then use it. But whenever possible, use the control holds you learned at the academy and the holds that are approved by your department. Do not be making up your own versions of these things, and only use control holds when appropriate, not to punish, not to harass, not to intimidate, but because they're necessary. And that is today's tip from Lexington. Gordon,
that was a meaningful, absolutely video also, because that's to do with some of the use of force tactics. But the other video that
This is the one.
Which one? Yes, this is it here.
Sorry.
Okay.
You know, for slave land.
Gordon Brad Hare with today's tip from Lexington. And today's tip is for law enforcement and custody officers, and it deals with our obligations related to excessive force. As law enforcement and custody professionals, many times we protect people from others. But one day you might find yourself protecting someone from a member of your own agency. When you see another officer using force that you know is unreasonable, you are required to intercede. You've got to take action to prevent the unlawful force when you can. Hopefully the situation never occurs, that situations never get out of hand. Hopefully you've stepped in and offered to take over when you saw a coworker getting really upset. Hopefully everyone got a chance to cool down when you suggested your coworker start taking statements or help with something else. But when you see another officer use unlawful force, you've got an obligation to report it right away. It doesn't matter if it's your friend, your coworker, or even your supervisor. I don't care how difficult or uncomfortable it might be. No looking the other way, no leaving out the details in your report. Preventing excessive force and reporting excessive force is required by law, and it's probably required by your agency's policy. Also, it's the right thing to do. And that is today's Tip for Flexible. Fort Graham, signing off.
So the reason that video is important is because we specifically don't have that words or language in our policy, but there's words in our policies that deals with, basically being a police officer, whether it be a police officer using unjustified force or, overuse of force, that they're required to basically tell someone, whether it be their supervisor or another subordinate, let us know, because that will not be tolerated in the Sunbury Police Department. To wrap up a couple things here quick, I just want to give a couple more things on our general orders, our agency's role, oath of office, our canon of ethics, our agency's missions and values. Under our oath of office, one of the things it says, you acknowledge that they will uphold, obey, and enforce the law without consideration to a person's race, color, sex, religious creed, sexual orientation, age, national origin, ancestry, handicap, or disability. And our agency's mission is to perform our duties and fulfill our responsibilities of enforcing the law, preserving peace, and providing effective police services with the intent of improving the quality of life for all citizens within our jurisdictions, consistent with the goals and missions of the city of Sunbury, and to perform as a team while aspiring to achieve the highest ethical and moral standards by applying the values of courage, integrity, loyalty, and professionalism in every aspect of our profession. Our value statements also are service to the community, integrity, respect for diversity, responsibility and accountability, and also professionalism. Under our canon of police ethics, we have the primary job responsibility, limitations of authority, duties to be familiar with the law, responsibilities of self and other public officials, utilization of proper means to gain the proper ends. And one of the things under that I highlighted is, if the law is to be honored, it must first be honored by those who enforce it. And that means that goes deep within our department. Cooperation with public officials in the discharge of their authorized duties. Private conduct. 7, conduct toward the public. And this is important, so I highlighted this also. The law enforcement officer, mindful of his responsibility to the whole community, shall deal with the individuals of the community in a manner calculated to instill respect for its law and its police service. So those are the few things in our canon that I thought it was very important that the council needed to hear. Also, under our law enforcement code of ethics, I'm going to read this. I know we'll go along here, but I think this is very important in the time we're in. So I think it's very important that everybody hears what's going on. Basically, our law enforcement code of ethics. As a law enforcement officer, my fundamental duty is to serve the community, to safeguard lives and property, protect the innocent against deception, the weak against the oppression or intimidation, and the peaceful against violence or disorder, and to respect the constitutional rights of all with liberty, equality, and justice. I will keep my private life unsullied as an example to all, and will behave in a manner that does not bring discredit to me or to my agency. I will maintain courageous calm in the face of danger, scorn, or ridicule. Develop self-restraint. Be constantly mindful of the welfare of others. Honest in thought and deed, both in my personal and official life. I will be exemplary in obeying the law and the regulations of my department. Whatever I see or hear of confidential nature or that is confided to me in my official capacity will be kept ever secret unless revelation is necessary in the performance of my duty. I will never act officially or permit personal feelings, prejudices, political beliefs, aspirations, animosities, or friendship to influence my decisions. With no compromise for crime, with the relentless prosecution of criminals, I will enforce the law courteously and appropriately without fear or favor, malice or ill will, never employing unnecessary force or violence, and never accepting gratuities. I recognize the badge of my office as a symbol of public faith, and I accept it as a public trust to be held so long as I am true to the ethics of police service. I will never engage in acts of corruption or bribery, nor will I condone such acts by the other police officers. I will cooperate with all legally authorized agencies and the representatives in the pursuit of justice. I know that I am alone and am responsible for my own standard of professional performance, and will take every reasonable opportunity to enhance and improve my level of knowledge and competence. I will constantly strive to achieve these objectives and ideals, dedicating myself before God to my chosen profession, law enforcement. So we also have our oath of honor in there that everybody has taken. On my honor, I will never betray my badge, my integrity, my character, or public trust. I will always have the courage to hold myself and others accountable for our actions. I will uphold my Constitution, my community, and the agency I serve. So those are some of the things that our new officers, even our veteran officers, we revised these policies and procedures over the last 2 to 3 years. There's a lot of work put into them from former Chief Miller. He had a lot of say in a lot of these, and then the union members, Officer Slack, now Corporal Slack, myself, Sergeant Bremen, we had a lot of dealings with trying to get these, make the police department better. There's a reason we did this, because like we said before, we're in a unique situation. We have almost a whole brand new department. We're getting a new building, and our end goal is accreditation to make the police department a very great police department in the 21st century. And some of the things that you go back and listen to the governor last week, he decided he wanted to bring up about the 21st century policing by Barack Obama, and I had a very heated conversation with the mayor about this because I saw it when it came out. This came out in 2015. It took the governor, you know, he's been in office 5-6 years. It took him 5 years to put this into place. This was 5 years ago that President Barack Obama put this into place, and some of them are really good stuff. And the reason I'm going to tell you, there's a bunch of pillars. Pillar 1 is building trust and legitimacy. Pillar number 2 is policy and oversight. Pillar 3 is technology and social media. Pillar 4 is community policing and crime reduction. Pillar 5 is training and education. Pillar 6 is officer wellness and safety. We have already started this process. I know the mayor started it a couple of years ago when I came on the board. We started a lot of this already. We're ahead of the ballgame, which I'm very grateful for. With the mayor and council as a whole, we've all been working together to make it more transparent in the police department. That's what I've been trying to do. And I think that now is a perfect time to get this out there. The conversation can't stop. We can't let what happened a couple of weeks ago with Mr. Floyd continue down the road. We got to keep moving forward. But the conversation cannot stop. And it starts with smaller communities. Some of these larger communities and legislatures need to take they need to take it from the smaller communities. They need to take the word from the smaller communities. That's where it starts. It starts down here. It doesn't start at the top. It starts down here. It starts down here with us, the smaller communities. And I'm very proud to say that we are well on our way to having one of the best police departments, if not the best police department in the area. I have a lot of brothers and sisters in law enforcement in this area. I trust them all. They're all good police officers, but my main concern is Sunbury, and we are well on our way. So thank you for your time. I know it's long-winded, but I think it needed to be said now. Thank you.